Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. I'm starting another little mini series that I'm going to go solo with, and we're going to dive into emotions. And before you're like, yawn, ho hum, this is boring, I want to explain what I mean. So a big part of what I do, and if you follow me on social media or you're on my email list, and I've been talking about this for a while, but a big piece of what I do and I've added to my work in the past, 6 months or so, is really diving into the emotional root cause of the physical symptoms on the body. And as you've heard me say many times before, I am a firm believer that there is always an emotional or energetic root cause to the physical things happening on the body. And I'll just say this too, just as a disclaimer, going through this series, I will use the words energy and emotions interchangeably. For me, it's the same thing. Emotions are just energy and motion, which we will dive into that a little bit deeper, but I will use those words interchangeably. So just know those are, to me, one and the same. So anyway, I believe that this is a huge piece of the root cause it is the root cause of things that are showing up physically on the body. And so I want to go a little bit deeper on that piece before we jump into kind of the meat and the potatoes, if you will, of what we're going to talk about. Because I think it's important to just kind of preface this series. So emotions, like I said, are energy and motions, right? Emotions, when you feel an emotion, it causes a chemical reaction in the body. There are certain neurotransmitters that are emitted that are made precursors of minerals, like they're make chemicals in the body. And I'll get it actually in this episode, I'll get into this kind of the science behind that, how long it lasts kind of thing. But with this chemical reaction in the body, this chemical process that's associated with emotions, emoting, right? Feeling emotions is a very it's a short process actually. But the problem is when we don't allow ourselves to feel all the way through the feels, right? We don't allow ourselves to feel it, then this energy gets stuck in the body. These emotions get stuck in the body. And so you're literally have this chemical reaction that kind of halts and kind of gets stuck in the middle. So it hasn't allowed itself to fully process. It hasn't allowed the full process to complete itself, right? And so there's kind of this stuck. If you think about when you you're looking at a big piece of machinery and you cut it off, like it just kind of right? That's what happens. And that's kind of what happens when we are not allowing the full emotional process. And so when you have this stored energy, this stuck energy in the body, this is going to cause a chain reaction of events because, like I mentioned, there are neurotransmitters that are emitted when you're feeling an emotion. And the precursor of all these are different minerals, enzymes, right? They're things that have to be created to make these neurotransmitters. And so now it's kind of halting all of those processes. So there's this chemical reaction that's also been halted, that's stalling out energy in the body. And you've heard me talk. I did my chakra series last year, kind of linking together the energetic and the physical body. And that's really, for me, where it stems from, right? So you have these 7 main chakras or energy centers in the body. And all of these specific energy centers are associated with the physical part of the body. And, when I went through this series last year, I connected all the glands, right? There's certain glands that emit certain hormones that are related, right? And so again, right, just tying all the pieces together, you think emotional process, there's neurotransmitters, there's hormones, there's all these things that happen when you feel an emotion. All of these specific hormones and neurotransmitters, some tied to specific glands that emit these. You see the connection here. It's all connected, right? We can separate the mind and the body all we want to, but the fact is it is not separate. It is not separate. You cannot separate it. And so when we get stuck in an emotion, when an emotion or an emotional event gets stuck in the body, it is going to stall out the energy. And so it's, what happens is associated with a particular energy center, and the flow of that energy center, or the lack thereof, is going to affect the flow of other energy centers, right? They're just little, like, remember, chakra is the Sanskrit word for wheel. It's just a wheel of energy. And so when one wheel slows down, they're all not going to be running optimally. And so this is going to affect how that specific energy center is functioning, and it's going to affect the gland associated with that, the hormones that are emitted from that gland. Those hormones are going to affect another gland, because all hormones are chemical messengers, right? They're sending messages to other parts of the body. And so again, this chain reaction of events happens. And so do you see, just with me kind of going through that really quick explanation, do you see how emotions are tied to our physical body, and how this causes dis-ease in the body when we have these emotions that aren't allowed to fully be expressed, felt, moved through the body, how it gets stuck? And so this is why I have tied this into my work, and is such a big piece of what I do now, is because I'm recognizing, and I think a lot of us in the functional world are recognizing, that, the supplements and the diet, that's great, the exercise or whatever, that's great and all, but you can't out diet or out supplement what's going on in your heart and in your head. Do you know what I mean? You cannot supplement that. So we have to get to the root cause of where this stagnation happened in the body energetically. And there's limiting beliefs and thoughts associated with that are perpetuating that loop, that cycle of stuck stored energy in the body. And we're going to talk about thoughts and beliefs too, but today I wanted to preface with that, but today I want to talk about the power of feeling emotions. All right, I want to start with this piece. So I just went through that explanation of kind of how the root cause of all disease starts with this emotional piece, right? And so one of the big things that, kind of the common theme throughout all these episodes I'm going to be doing, is about feeling emotions, and allowing these emotions to move through the body. And I want to say this before I dive into the good stuff here, is, there's so many books and podcasts, audiobooks, there's so many things, so many ways, places that you can learn all of this about emotional intelligence, emotional resiliency, emotional release, all of these things. And most of what I'm going to talk about today comes from my studying Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, Carl Jung's work. There's a gal you can find on Instagram, Victoria Song, studying her work, and all of the people that they've studied. So there's a lot of ways you can dive deeper on this. This is just kind of like the Cliff's Note version, right, of what you need to know to kind of get yourself in the right place, the right mindset, to start using these tools to help build that emotional resiliency and build that emotional intelligence, like build that within your body. Because really and truly, the more we can hone in on these tools and these things that we're going to talk about, the more we can find more ease and flow in our body and how our body is functioning, more ease and flow in your relationships, your communication. I mean, it translates to so many parts of life. But you really, like Victoria's song talks about, like unleashing your superpowers when you're able to work through these emotions and let go of the contraction, the resistance, right? That stuck emotions are creating in the body. It's like this whole other realm of superpowers that unleashes itself. So that being said, let's talk about the power of feeling emotions and what that looks like in the body. So neuroscience has shown us that us as humans, we operate on autopilot about 95% of the time. So that means that 95% of what we're thinking and doing is like, we're not even thinking about it, right? It's literally on autopilot. A lot of times we try to keep going using positive thoughts, and as if like we can just, it's kind of like that toxic positivity thing where we can just like positive think our way out of things, but that's really not how it works. Because you can mentally tell yourself, like, I can do this all day long, right? I can be positive, and I'm positive, and I'm happy, and I'm right. You can try to mental your way through it and tell yourself that. But if your body is holding feelings and emotions and memories of inadequacy, unworthiness, or any conditioned feeling of contraction or resistance, you're going to be stuck, right? It all starts in the body. And you've probably heard me mention that book, The Body Keeps the Score. And that's a really good illustration of that, because
again, your mind and your body have got to be on the same page. So you just positive thinking your way out of things is not, if you feel like, why do I get stuck in these patterns? And why do I get, it's typically, that's the thing, is your mind and your body are not on the same page. Your mind is telling yourself like, no, 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 it's fine. It's fine. We're good. But your body is like, no, we're not, right? There's something there. And so almost all of your actions, your thoughts, your decisions, emotions, behaviors, all of this comes from the programming of your subconscious, right? Like I said, 95% of what we do, it happens on autopilot. So I think a lot of times that the problem here, or how it starts, or how it, maybe not how it starts, but just the way we perpetuate the cycle is it's just the busyness of life, right? It's really easy for us to just kind of push our emotions aside so we can get things done. And like I said, when we don't allow ourselves to actually feel the emotion, we can just push them aside and think like, I'll deal with it later. But the feelings are still there, right? They're in your subconscious, they're in your body. You went halted that process like I was talking about. Like you just cut the cord, you pulled the cord on the emotional process. And so it's stuck there. And it's just like kind of lingering under the surface. And the thing is, it's just is ignoring them for too long there are consequences to that, right? And it's kind of stalls out the engine, right? We pulled the plug on one engine there, and you're not running full throttle. And so when you and this is what happens when like I work with my clients with emotional release process, and we do the quantum healing sessions that I do, is we find one emotion, we do one emotion at a time when we're uncovering things, because it's typically like it's like the layers of an onion. I know that's like a cliche analogy, but it really is. But to me, I always think about it as just garbage on top of garbage, because you have this thing, right? And then we're too busy to deal with it. So we're like, oh, I'll deal with that later. Like I'll process that later. But then we don't. And it just sits there under the surface, and then something else happens. Oh, I'll process that later too. And so it piles on top. And we keep doing that. So you're literally just piling garbage on top of garbage, right? Emotion on top of emotion. And so there's so many things buried under layers of things that we just haven't had the time to deal with, right? I don't have time to deal with that right now. We say that a lot, and I'm guilty of it too, trust me. So we're just stacking things on top of each other, right? And so I think I want to go through some of the big emotions that get stuck the most. And I think, honestly, and there's, a lot of science that says a lot of different things, but I really feel like these emotions are kind of at the core of most everything we feel. There's some shade of these emotions, right? They come in different forms, but this is kind of like the overarching theme, right? And the first one is fear. And this is a big one that I work with clients, is fear is, and this can show up in a lot of different ways, right? Because we have the fear of abandonment, we have the fear of rejection, we have the fear of it being meaningless, we have right, there's so many ways fear can show up. And fear really can be a powerful motivator, right? We're all driven to varying degrees by fear, depending on how much conditioning we've had around, how we need to act to be accepted and be safe. But when we feel fear, right? This fear, like if you have a fear of getting hit, getting yelled at, getting punished for certain behaviors, fear of being seen, for standing out, fear of, being bullied or laughed at, this type of fear, right? It's this kind of impending doom sensor, right? Your body, it's going to leave an imprint on your nervous system, right? It's going to leave like traces of it in your body. And so you're going to avoid certain experiences from happening to you again, so you don't feel that feeling again, right? You don't want to feel unsafe. We're going to talk about the nervous system in terms of like its job is to keep you safe later, but that's really a lot of times why these types of emotions come up, right? When you're in fear, the reptilian part of your brain is activated and you go into survival mode, right? Your body is literally like, I'm going to die, right? Even if it's not a life or death situation, that's just how our reptilian brain works. And so if you tend to live in contraction in an emotion like this, your nervous system can't tolerate fear without jumping into panic. Immediately it goes into panic, right? It's this fight, flight, or freeze state. And any uncertainty feels just incredibly unsafe for your body. And so when you feel into this, when this happens, you really turn into this binary way of thinking, right? It's good, bad, right, wrong, my success, failure, right? It's very white, black thinking. It's one or the other, right? There's not a whole lot of options and your kind of field of possibility really narrows. It's A or B, it's all or nothing. It's always or never generalizations. That's what happens. And so this black and white thinking, jumping to conclusions, all of this is ways that your mind attempts to conveniently put things into boxes that gives you this false sense of certainty, right? That's why it's happening. If I just label it as A or B, I know one is good and one is not. And so I feel safe, right? So there's a quote by Richard Rudd. Richard Rudd was the creator of the Gene Keys, which is kind of like the cousin to human design. I talked about it a little bit, but he talks about fear and he says fear creates a very effective biofeedback loop that ensures its own survival. It's really very clever when you think about it. Fear is afraid of itself, which ensures that it never accepts itself, which ensures that it always survives. Pure fear does not even have a target. Pure fear is simply a collective thought form that hangs like a gray fog across our world. And I find that such a powerful statement about fear because it's just this cycle. It puts you in a loop, right? It just puts you in this perpetual loop. And if your body is familiar with this feedback loop, then you're going to unconsciously seek out what confirms your worldview. And that's how fear becomes self-fulfilling because you're going to find things that validates what you're thinking, right? If you're looking at everything and there's fear, then you're going to automatically find that and seek it out. So this is going to become your reality. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, which I'm sure I'll say this a million times again, but Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about your personality creates your personal reality. If your personality is this biofeedback loop of fear, everything is about fear, that's what you're going to find. That's going to show up for you in your reality, right? And so I want you to think about this. If fear is something that you experience a lot, this is an emotion that comes up a lot for you, that you find drives your decisions, your thoughts, your beliefs, right? Think about this. If you want to be less easily manipulated or controlled by fear, think about this. Notice how comfortable you are with uncertainty of just not knowing. And this is a big one, y'all. This is a big one that I've been working through the past couple of years because I know for me, like if you ever labored yourself as a control freak, where does that come from? Fear. It's fear. Control freak is not about control. It's about fear that you control it because there's fear. So, you can label things, however you want, but there's always some root emotion associated with it. And so if you've ever been a control freak, then this is where it stems from. And I've dealt with that myself. So notice how comfortable you are with uncertainty or just not knowing. And then see if you can shift your relationship to accept that whatever comes up, whatever arises without trying to control it and predict it, control people, predict people, circumstances, the situation, right? Just kind of surrendering. Hello. So this is how you navigate change and how you shift out of fear. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm making it sound very simple right now. I know it's not, but easy. Not, it is simple, but it's not easy, right? So can you stay open? Can you stay expansive in the unknown, right? Can you let go of control? Can you let go of the outcome? Can you let go of trying to control people, circumstances, the outcome, right? This is when you claim your power. And you might think you have more power when you're holding control, but you're not. And there's a lot of stories, we talk about holding things with a clenched hand and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of, little sayings that go along with that. But the fact is you are letting go of a lot of your power when you are trying to control out of fear because of that, because you're holding on. It's based on this emotion, which, like I said, it constricts this your field of possibilities narrows, your very binary thinking, and it really restricts what's possible for you, right? It narrows what is actually possible for you because all of your decisions are made from that narrow perspective. Right. So fear is such a big one that gets stuck in the body. And it's one too, again, there's layers of this. There are layers of this that we have to let go of. The next one I want to talk about is guilt. Guilt and shame are the other two that I want to talk about. So guilt is another thing that can be motivating your choices. And especially with us women, I find guilt and shame are two of the most common emotions that I'm helping women let go of. And there's a lot of reasons for women to feel guilty, right? You feel guilty for putting your needs first. You feel guilty for, having goals and aspirations and doing what you want to do and what you want to have or should have or be or do, right? There's a lot of reasons for women to feel guilty. And Notice when you're weighing the pros and cons to a decision that you're making, how many reasons are tied to what you think you're supposed to, quote unquote, should do versus what you want to do, right? When you're living in terms of shoulds, when you're shoulding yourself, you've totally lost your connection with what you want. And now you're making your decision based off of guilt, right? And this drives so many decisions, especially for women. It's a big thing, y'all. This can also show up as, I don't know what I want, or I don't know what I want to do, right? Being indecisive in that way. This is a pretty common sign that you're living according to the shoulds and trying to like meet others' expectations versus your own, right? And I think there's a healthy way to feel guilt, right? Like a healthy way to feel guilt is just the awareness in response to a situation where we can learn from our behaviors and choose to do better next time, right? We made a mistake, and it's common, it's natural for us to feel guilty. We made a mistake about something, right? But it's just recognizing that and knowing, okay, I can do better next time. It's not holding on to it. Unhealthy guilt is like this hyper fixation on it, on your behavior, or putting more weight on others' needs and wants before your own, while believing that anytime you're putting your needs first, you're being selfish, right? But if you're playing the martyr card, right, that's an unhealthy form of guilt. And playing the martyr card is also a very common thing that I have to help women through. And it comes from guilt. And this is like deep-seated things that a lot of times is multi-generational, and it's been conditioned, and it's a lot of complex things to untie. But allowing guilt to drive your choices is going to lead to resentment, right? Resentment towards other people, maybe your partner, your spouse, right? Resentment is a big thing. And it's going to be exhausting because you're literally putting everybody else's needs or expectations before your own. And you end up sacrificing what you really want in life. And that's exhausting, right? There's a lot of energy that gets drained from living up according to others people's expectations, what other people expect from you, or what you think other people want from you, right? That's a lot of wasted energy. And I think about, the a lot of times people pleasing falls into this category. There's guilt because we'll have to do, what makes everybody else happy, because right, because you feel guilty for doing what makes you happy. And it's this abandonment of self. And I know I'm going to probably mention that multiple times, but it's this abandonment of self, of my needs aren't important. Everybody else is more important than me. And then two, again, when it turns into this martyr thing, then it's like, well, I've got to prove that I can sacrifice and that I'm better because I can sacrifice. Like it turns into this weird, like warped thing of like, now I can show I'm better because I can sacrifice the most, right? It's not healthy. And a lot of it stems from this deep-seated guilt that a lot of times, honestly, I think we're born with. It's in our DNA that we have to untangle as women, especially as women say. I just think it's a deep thing for women. The patriarchy, the whole thing, again, that's another rabbit hole. But anyway, I find that a lot of times decisions and just life paths that women take have all been built on guilt. So that's a big one. Next is shame. Shame is another really common one that gets stuck and stored. So if you know Brene Brown, I just want to mention her because she's dedicated basically her life to studying and teaching about shame. If you don't know who she is, she's got lots of really great books and has extensive research and studies and all this. But it's a really great way to understand it. It's like pathogenic, right? It just spreads. And she defines shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. And I like that there's a distinction between guilt and shame. Guilt is a focus on the behavior and shame is a focus on the person, right? What this says about me. Guilt says I did something bad and shame says I am bad, right? It's about you as a person. And so it's interesting to me with the shame thing. And gosh, y'all, this comes up so much. And I will say this as a caveat, the guilt and the shame, these emotions live in the sacral center. The sacral center is associated with your reproductive organs. So, hello, women with hormonal imbalances. Like, I'm not kidding, y'all. Every woman, and I can say this like hand to the Bible, God's honest truth. I can say this, every woman I have worked with that has had hormonal imbalances, when we've done emotional release practices, guilt and shame come up every freaking time. I'm not kidding. Shame, especially. So I just want to say that. But I think it's interesting how well we can separate the doing from the being. Do you see what I mean? The guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad, right? So how easy it is, especially as women, how easy it is for us to associate our own self-worth with something that we did, right? That's just, it's just so fascinating to me. And versus, and let me say the alternative being that was bad behavior versus you're a bad person. You know what I mean? Like the behavior, yes, I can own up to the behavior, but not I'm a bad person, right? The program launch failed versus I'm a failure, right? This leads me actually to the next emotion I want to talk about, because I find that shame can get so kind of warped, and it's a hard one for a lot of people to express, that it can trigger other things like anger, right? Versus what you're actually feeling. And shame for people is uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. And it's like the shame is so uncomfortable that the secondary emotion of anger comes to kind of protect it from feeling it. And so I find too, when I have clients do these, these emotional release sessions with me and these quantum healing sessions, I always recommend doing more than one. Like doing one is great, right? That's going to help give you some kind of a jump start. But for me, it's so often that when you release one emotion, it was really hiding something else deeper that's underneath. And that needs to be let go of, right? And so moving into what I was talking about anger, anger is an interesting one. And I feel like the majority of the time, anger is a secondary emotion. Like it's not really what you're feeling, right? Most of the time, anger is misdirected fear. And I think that, for people, it's easier to feel anger than sadness. It's easier to feel anger than grief. It's easier to feel anger than fear, right? It's an easy one to cover up the fear, the anger, or the sadness, the grief, right? I think it's easier. And so, especially if you've ever learned that weakness equals, or sadness equals weakness, which we'll talk about in another episode, then it's by conditioning, our default is to feel anger, right? And so if you feel like it's easier for you to say, I'm mad at you versus you hurt my feelings. Do you see what I mean? Like for so many, it's easier that way. And I will say, not to call out men or anything, but for a lot of times, in a lot of cases, I dare say most cases, angry men, there's fear under there. There's some sort of fear under there. And that's what comes out. It's easier to feel angry because I don't feel like a baby, right? Or a wussy if I feel anger instead of sadness or instead of grief, right? I think the other thing too is a lot of people think that anger is a bad emotion. And I want to say this, there are no good versus bad or right versus wrong emotions, right? Emotions are just emotions. There are no good, no bad. They just are. And they are simply, literally, just energy in motion, which is why you can't just selectively feel positive emotions to numb out negative emotions. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to feel what you feel. Like you have to feel what comes up. And I think too, when we label an emotion as negative, this leads to its repressed state, which makes it way more complex to release. And this is what I was saying when I always encourage my clients to do multiple sessions for the emotional release, because you might consider, like I mentioned before, grief, fear, anger. You might feel all these as negative and maybe you want to avoid these, but repressed anger becomes rage, repressed grief becomes depression, repressed fear becomes panic and anxiety, right? Like the repressed version is like that version on steroids. So now you've just exacerbated the situation. You know what I mean? You don't want to hold on to something that needs to be felt and expressed, because the repressed version is equally as bad and typically worse, because now it's compounded. Now it's, again, that garbage on top of garbage scenario I gave you earlier. You just compounded it, and now it's layered underneath other stuff. And so if you try to ignore it, stuff it down, or avoid it, it's going to hold power over you. and it's going to hold your energy in your body hostage, right? It cannot flow freely. It's holding it hostage. And when your energy is held hostage, we start to feel this on the physical body. So I talked about these big emotions that get stuck. Those are the four big ones that I wanted to mention, and what happens when they're repressed. And I think when we repress these things, the act of repressing makes us feel like we have control over, people, circumstances, and control over emotions, right? That it has to go the way you want it to be, or else there's that control thing, right? There's this fear of us feeling the things and letting it go. But this mindset, this thinking keeps you in scarcity and anxiety and judgment and negative self-talk, negative beliefs, negative mindset, right? Mistrust, overall contraction and resistance. Again, like I said, it's holding your energy hostage. You have no energy to feel joyful and fulfillment and ecstasy and all these really great emotions if you're holding your energy hostage and it's all held up in these emotions that you haven't allowed to be released, felt, and released from the body. And that's what I want to talk about for a second before I wrap up this episode. Is I want to talk about what happens when we feel an emotion, because this is what's interesting, right? And I want to say this as a disclaimer here. I'm not downplaying anyone's trauma or process of processing trauma, right? Let me just say that first and foremost. But studies have shown that, like I mentioned before, emotions, it's a chemical process associated with it, right? And the chemical process is actually very quick. And emotion biologically only lasts for 90 seconds. 90 seconds, y'all. When you feel an emotion, the process only lasts 90 seconds. So the chemicals that flush through your body, that puts your body on alert, right? For all of that to work out, it takes 90 seconds or less. That means for 90 seconds, you can watch the process happening, you can feel it happening, and then you can watch it go away. After that, if you continue to feel the emotion, the fear, the anger, the shame, the guilt, whatever it is, then there is a thought pattern that is re-stimulating that circuitry that's having this physiological reaction over and over again. In other words, you have your beliefs, your subconscious beliefs have made the choice that you're going to continue to feel that over and over again. Your body has the capability to feel the emotion, work through it in 90 seconds or less. But here we are living with the same emotions that happened, that we felt, that happened 30 years ago. It's still in your freaking body now, right? It's a story that perpetuates itself. And I'm not saying that to cause you any shame or judgment. I'm saying it as a fact. It's crazy pants. Like, this is crazy pants. The fact that we can feel an emotion, biologically it lasts for 90 seconds, but we can hold on to something we felt that happened in the third grade. Do you know what I mean? So we are story making machines, right? We interpret our body's signals as emotions as fact, as like, this is the story, right? But it's just a process. And unless we attach a story to them and keep them alive, we can let them go. We have the capability to do that. So, and it doesn't mean for you to just move on when you feel something. And I'm going to talk about that tomorrow or in the next episode. But it means when you allow yourself to fully feel it, the depths of it, and not be afraid to feel the thing, you can literally allow yourself to go through the process and let go of the story. The only reason that you continue to feel the feeling is because you've attached a story to it. We've chosen to attach a story to it. And I'm going to talk about stories tomorrow. We talk about, or the next episode, I talk about limiting beliefs, but it means that you allow yourself to feel it in the moment, the depths of it, right? Allow yourself to go there. I know it's scary to feel the depths of grief. I know it's scary to feel the depths of fear. I know it feels scary to feel the depths of shame, right? I've felt all of those things multiple times, right? We all feel them. They're natural human emotions, but we keep ourselves from feeling it because I don't have time to deal with that. I'll deal with it later. I don't have time to feel, right? You don't give yourself the time because you know it's going to take some mental energy and emotional energy to do that. But The problem is when we don't, we can have a hard time controlling what our subconscious mind does with it, which is attach a story to it, and it perpetuates the loop. Now you're stuck in this biofeedback loop of this guilt or shame you felt in the third grade that keeps popping up for you, right? It's if it keeps popping up for you, this is what I tell my clients. Dr. Joe Dispenza says that a memory without emotion is called wisdom. If you can think back about an emotionally triggering event that happened, if you can think back and not feel an emotion, you can think about it with no emotional charge whatsoever. You've worked through it. Now it's called wisdom. I've learned from that, right? There's no emotional charge attached to that whatsoever. But if you are still thinking back to the situation and emotions still come up, it's an invitation to feel into it more, right? What is still there that I haven't worked through? What is still there that I haven't processed? What's still there that I'm trapping underneath other emotions, right? Like I was talking about how the anger can be, it can kind of, you repress it, it turns into something else, right? Am I repressing with another emotion? I thought it was this, but it's actually that, right? I had a client not too long ago. We were doing a session together, and we were working through an emotion, and the first one she mentioned, I was asking her questions about it, and she was like, "Well, I can't think of what happens when, what if I can't think of an event that triggered it?" I'm like, well, then we need to dig deeper, right? It's something else. And then when she was able to dig deeper into her subconscious, a totally different scenario popped out. And so, right, there it was again, her subconscious still trying to protect her, like, no, we don't need to go there. We don't need to think about it, when it was really a whole totally different thing, a different direction that we needed to go to release it. And so I want you to take that with you today after this episode, is thinking about, where are there invitations for you to let go of things that you haven't been able to let go of? And if you don't know, then I invite you to think about, take yourself to, maybe you don't have to go back a long ways, and, because a lot of times things are kind of hidden until we really dive into the subconscious. And that's something I want to say too, is sometimes it's not as easily as like, oh, let me just think about, what could be stored in my body. And that's why I do the process, my quantum healing sessions, where, I'm finishing up my certification in hypnotherapy right now, is because it requires us to have a conversation with your subconscious to allow those things to come forward. So it's not always, let me just think of, as if you're thinking, it's from your conscious mind, it's not from your subconscious. So it's getting down to the subconscious so we can get back there and figure out, okay, what's hidden down there, right? What's hidden back there. And so anyway, my invitation for you is to maybe just as a practice, maybe think about, something that's happened in the past 6 months that you remember as, an emotionally triggering event. And if you can think back to that thing that happened, are you feeling that with a totally clear mind? Again, where no emotional charge whatsoever, or does it drum up certain emotions? And I invite you, if you feel emotions being triggered in your body, then it's an invitation to feel into it more, right? Maybe allow yourself to go into kind of a mindful space, and kind of see what comes up. And, there's a saying that says pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? Our suffering is optional, right? The stories we attach to the emotions that we feel are optional. We don't have to feel those. We don't have to keep them attached to the pain. We don't have to continue with grief. And I want to say that too, because grief is a tough one. Because when you lose somebody that you love, that's the grief that I'm thinking of right now. It's popping in my head. Like, sure, you're going to miss them years later. And I don't think that ever goes away, but it's a choice for you to stay in the grief that clouds your decisions and your judgment and the way you live your life. Do you see what I mean? It's a difference of, I can miss someone that's not here with me anymore, or if it's a relationship, right? That there's grief that comes with a breakup or a divorce, right? You can miss that person or the relationship, but it's a choice to stay in the grief and allow that to be the emotion that stays with you and dictates what you do with your life and the decisions and all of that, right? There's a difference. So I'm going to leave you with that today. That was a lot. This is heavy stuff. So it should have also made a disclaimer about that. This is heavy stuff. This is a lot. And the other thing I want to invite you to, one more thing I want to say, talking about going back to what I was saying about the 90 seconds, how, the emotional process takes 90 seconds. When you feel an emotion, when you have a situation, when you get in a situation this week and you feel an emotion come up, give yourself that 90 seconds. Like, try the 90-second rule this week. When you feel the emotion hit you and you can feel your nervous system like winding up, getting ready to like, right? Go back to what I'm saying here about 90 seconds. Give yourself 90 seconds, maybe put on your watch, your timer, to pause and breathe, right? Deep inhales and exhales, allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling in the moment. Feel, and then allow yourself to feel the tension in your body ease. Allow it to feel yourself. So see if you can take that time, that 90 seconds, to feel yourself moving through the physiological process, right? Just try it out. See what happens. Okay, I've got a lot more to say on this, and I've got a few more episodes. So I love to know your thoughts on this, and I will see y'all in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I'd love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I can know how to provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics you'd like to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or you can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.